Greetings, beloved, and welcome to the fire. Welcome to Echoes from the Baobab tree. I am but a keeper of tales, and beneath this ancient, spreading canopy, we gather to listen to the whispers of our ancestors. We preserve the stories that the wind carries, stories of love that defied oceans, betrayals that shook the very earth, and redemptions that mended broken spirits. These are the echoes that travel through time, and if you listen closely, you will find a piece of your own heart beating within them. Tonight, we journey to the village of Iji, a place that learned a terrible truth too late. This is a story of a beautiful stranger named Mami Wura, whose smile was as warm as the morning sun and whose basket held eggs of impossible perfection. It is the story of a good man, Obasi, who watched his wife and children become silent, smiling shadows of themselves. And it is the story of a whole community, lulled into a peaceful sleep, forgetting that a heart that does not feel anger can also no longer feel joy. This tale, little ones, is a sharp stone wrapped in a soft leaf for every family, for every couple, for every individual who has ever held a pain too heavy to carry alone. It asks us, what do we do with our sorrow? Do we let it fester in the dark until it becomes a poison we serve to others? Or do we bring it into the light and allow the balm of community to heal the wound? For a pain buried alive never dies. It simply grows roots in the dark, and one day, it bursts forth, not as a tear, but as a storm. So, I ask you, my brothers and sisters, to gather close. If you find wisdom in these old whispers, do not let the echo fade. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let us build this community, this great village under the Baobab tree, together. Now, let the story breathe. Now, let's continue the story. If only they knew they were sold forbidden eggs. The truth, when it finally began to dawn in the village of Iji, did not come with a shout, but with a single, silent tear. It rolled down the cheek of little Ada as she sat perfectly still in the dust, not blinking, not breathing. Just waiting. Her mother, Neka, had called her for dinner 3 times, but Ada did not move. She just stared at the wall of their hut, a tiny, peaceful smile on her face, as if she were a doll waiting to be picked up. And that was the most terrifying part, the peace. It was a quiet that had fallen over Iji like a heavy blanket, smothering all the laughter, the arguments, the life. It was a peace that felt dead. And it all started with the eggs. The beautiful, perfect, forbidden eggs from the kind stranger. What dark magic had they eaten? And what would become of little Ada, and all the others who were now just empty shells? The horror was only just beginning. It all began on a hot Tuesday market day in the heart of Iji village. The air was thick with the smell of smoked fish, ripe mangoes, and the dust kicked up by 100 busy feet. The market drum had just finished its morning call, and traders were shouting their prices. It was on this ordinary day that a woman no one had ever seen before walked calmly into the center of the chaos. She was tall and graceful, her movements as smooth as flowing water. Her name, she said, was Mami Wura. And oh, listener, she was a sight to behold. Her wrapper was the color of the sky at sunset, a brilliant orange and blue, and her head was held high with a quiet confidence that made people stop and stare. But it was what she carried that truly caught everyone's eye, a large, beautifully woven basket balanced perfectly on her head. She didn't shout like the other traders. She simply found an empty spot near the yam sellers, spread a clean, white cloth on the ground, and began to unload her goods. And what goods they were! Eggs. But these were not like any eggs the people of Iji had ever seen. They were larger, with shells so clean and white they seemed to glow in the morning sun. They were perfectly shaped, not a single crack or blemish on them. Mami Wura smiled warmly at the gathering crowd. Good people of Iji, she said, her voice like a soft song. My name is Mami Wura. I have traveled far and I bring you a gift of health and peace. My eggs are special. They will fill your belly and calm your heart. And for today, Your first dozen is not 50 naira, not 40 naira, but only 25 naira. A murmur of excitement ran through the crowd. Such beauty for such a cheap price. It was too good to be true. Mama Nkechi, the oldest woman in the market, narrowed her eyes. She was a woman who trusted her gut, and her gut was twisting itself into a knot. "Where do you come from, woman?" she asked, her voice sharp. "And how can your eggs be so fine and so cheap?" Mami Wura's smile never faded. She looked Mama Nkechi directly in the eye, her own eyes seeming to shimmer with kindness. "I come from a place where the hens drink from crystal streams and eat only the finest grains, Mama. I sell them cheaply because I wish to share this blessing, not to become rich." "Here," she said, picking up a perfect egg and handing it to the old woman. "A gift for your wisdom. See for yourself." Mama Nkechi, disarmed by the gift and the respectful tone, took the egg. It felt warm and strangely heavy in her hand. Her suspicion began to melt away, replaced by a sudden, warm feeling of trust. She smiled back. "You are a good woman," she declared to the crowd. "Iji welcomes you." And just like that, Mami Wura was in. Weeks passed, and Mami Wura became a beloved part of the village. Her stall was always the busiest. Her eggs were in every pot, every kitchen. She was generous, often giving an extra egg to a struggling mother or selling on credit to a farmer who had a bad season. She would laugh with the women, tell stories to the children, and always she had a kind word for everyone. But there were small, strange things that only a few noticed. Obasi, a young farmer with a sharp mind, was one of them. He noticed that Mami Wura never bought any food from the other market women. She never seemed to eat at all. He also saw that no one ever saw her bring new crates of eggs to her small hut at the edge of the village. The basket, it seemed, was always full. How? One evening, as Obasi was returning from his farm later than usual, he took the path that went behind Mami Wura's hut. The moon was full and bright. As he passed, he heard a low, humming sound. It wasn't a song he knew. It was a low, steady chant, a whisper that seemed to make the very air vibrate. Curious, and feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the night air, he crept closer and peered through a gap in the hut's wall. What he saw made his blood run cold. Mami Wura was not sleeping. She was kneeling on the floor. In front of her was her large basket, and in it, the eggs were glowing. A soft, pale, greenish light pulsed from them, like the heartbeat of a ghost. Mami Wura had her hands stretched over the basket, her eyes closed, and she was whispering words he could not quite hear, but that filled him with a deep, primal fear. This was no simple trader. This was something else entirely. He stumbled back, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He had to tell someone. He ran straight to the compound of the village chief, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He burst in, interrupting the chief who was sharing a kola nut with the elders. "Chief! Elders!" Obasi cried, his voice trembling. "We are in danger. The egg woman. Mami Wura, she is a witch. Her eggs are not normal. I saw them. I saw them glowing with my own eyes." The chief, a large, calm man named Is, looked at Obasi with a mix of concern and amusement. "Obasi, my son," he said slowly. "You have been working too hard under the sun. Mami Wura is a blessing to us. Since she came, the fights have stopped. The children are obedient. There is peace in Iji. But it is not real peace." Obasi insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "It is a trick. She is controlling us with those eggs." One of the elders chuckled. "The only thing she is controlling is the price of eggs, and for that we are grateful. Now, go home and rest, my boy." Dejected and terrified, Obasi left the chief's compound. No one would listen. As he walked home, he saw the village in a new light. The silence he had once found comforting now felt heavy and unnatural. People sat outside their huts, not talking, just staring into the distance with calm, empty smiles. It was as if the entire village was sleeping with its eyes wide open. He reached his own hut, determined to at least protect his family. He would throw every single one of those cursed eggs away. But as he pushed the curtain aside, he froze. The scene inside made his stomach drop to his feet. His wife, Amora, and his 2 young sons were sitting around the small table in the center of the room. The table was empty except for a single, pristine, white egg. It sat on a plate, glowing faintly in the dim light of the oil lamp. They weren't touching it. They were just staring at it, their faces blank, their bodies utterly still. They did not look up when he entered. They did not seem to notice he was there at all. Amora slowly reached out a hand and placed it on the egg. A serene, vacant smile spread across her face. Then, in unison, all 3 of them, his wife and his children, turned their heads slowly and looked directly at him. Their eyes were wide and clear, but there was no one home behind them. No love, no recognition, no life. And Amora spoke, her voice a flat, calm monotone that was nothing like her own. "Obasi," she said. "It is time for you to eat your egg." Obasi's blood turned to ice in his veins. The words, spoken in his wife's voice but with a cold, hollow tone that was not hers, hung in the air like a poison. His 2 sons, his bright, laughing boys, simply stared at him with those same empty eyes. The single egg on the plate seemed to pulse with a soft, malevolent light, and he knew, with a certainty that shook his soul, that it was calling to him. "Amora," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Chidi. Dubom. It is me, your father." There was no reaction. No flicker of recognition. It was as if he were speaking to statues. Amora slowly pushed the plate towards his empty spot at the table. "Sit, Obasi," she intoned. "Eat. You will find peace." A wave of terror and grief so powerful it made him dizzy washed over Obasi. He wanted to scream, to smash the egg, to shake his family until they woke up. But he was frozen, trapped in this nightmare. He took a step back, his hands trembling. I am not hungry," he stammered, the light tasting like ash in his mouth. For a long, terrifying moment, the 3 of them just stared at him, their heads tilted in unison. Then, as if a silent command had been given, they all turned back to look at the egg, their attention once again completely absorbed by it. The connection was broken. He had been dismissed. Obasi stumbled out of his own hut, gasping for fresh air. But the air outside was no better. The village of Iji was silent. Eerily silent. No babies cried. No mothers called out. No dogs barked. The only sound was the gentle rustle of the palm trees, which now sounded like ghostly whispers. He looked around and saw his neighbors. Some were sitting on stools, staring at nothing. Others were standing perfectly still in the middle of the compound, their faces smooth and expressionless. They were all like his family, empty shells, waiting for a command. He was alone. He was the only one left awake in a village that had been put to sleep. The next morning, the sun rose on a changed Iji. Obasi, who had not slept a wink, watched from the shadows as the villagers began to move. But it wasn't the lively, chaotic movement of before. It was a slow, synchronized, and peaceful routine. They moved like water flowing down a gentle stream, without splashes or ripples. They all started walking towards the market square. His heart pounding, Obasi followed, keeping to the sides of the compounds, hiding behind huts. He had to see what was happening. He had to understand. In the market square, Mami Wura stood in her usual spot. Her basket was full of the glowing white eggs. The villagers formed a neat, quiet line in front of her. There was no pushing, no joking, no talking. One by one, they stepped forward. Mami Wura would smile her warm, kind smile, hand them a single egg, and touch their hand gently. As she did, a faint green light seemed to pass from her fingers to theirs. The person would then bow their head slightly, a look of pure bliss on their face, and walk away, immediately beginning to eat the raw egg, shell and all. Obasi felt sick. This was how she did it. She didn't need to sell to them anymore. She was feeding them directly, reinforcing her control every single day. He saw Chief Is in the line, looking more like a humble farmer than a leader. When it was his turn, he accepted the egg and the touch with a grateful smile. Obasi's last hope faded. There was no one to appeal to. The chief was under her spell. As the line thinned, Obasi's eyes fell on one person who was not in it, old Mama Getchi. She was standing at the door of her hut, watching the scene with a grim expression. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't peaceful. She looked worried. A spark of hope ignited in Obasi's chest. Was it possible? Had she not eaten the eggs? When the market ritual was over and the villagers had dispersed to their quiet, empty daily routines, Obasi crept over to Mama Getchi's hut. She saw him coming and quickly ushered him inside. "You see it too, don't you, my son?" she whispered, her old eyes filled with fear and wisdom. "I stopped eating the eggs after the first week. My stomach, it cannot handle rich food. I gave them all to my grandchildren." Her voice broke. "And now they are gone from me. They look at me, but they do not see their grandmother." Obasi sank to the floor, relief and despair warring within him. "What is she doing to them, Mama? What are those eggs?" Mama Getchi shook her head, her wrinkled face a map of sorrow. "I do not know for sure. But my grandmother told me stories of spirits who could steal a person's will, who could bury their soul deep inside them, leaving only obedient body behind. They use a vessel, something the person consumes willingly. An egg, a seed, a piece of fruit. We have to stop her," Obasi said, his voice fierce with determination. "How?" Mama Getchi asked. "We are two against a whole village. And they are not themselves. If we try to hurt her, they will protect her. They will kill us for her, and they will do it with a smile on their faces." They sat in silence, the weight of their powerlessness pressing down on them. Then, Mama Getchi leaned forward, her voice dropping to the faintest of whispers. "There is one thing. The old stories say that such magic always has a source. A place of power. She must be creating this cursed egg somewhere. She does not get them from any chicken we know." "Her hut," Obasi said immediately, remembering the glowing basket from the night before. "I saw the eggs glowing inside her hut." Mama Getchi's eyes widened. "Then that is not the source. The magic is too strong to be performed where people live. It would sicken the land. She must go to a sacred place, a powerful place, to prepare them. We must find that place. We must see what she does there. That is the only way we will learn how to break this curse." For the next 2 days, Obasi and Mama Getchi watched Mami Wura's every move. She spent her days in the village, playing the part of the benevolent provider, her kindness a sharp and painful contrast to the horror she was inflicting. But on the second night, under the cover of a moonless, inky black sky, she made her move. Obasi, who was hiding in the bushes near her hut, saw her slip out. She was not carrying her large market basket. Instead, she held a small, covered clay pot. She moved silently, like a shadow, and headed not towards the village, but away from it, towards the forbidden side of the river where the ancient, dense forest began. This was it. Obasi's heart hammered against his ribs. He followed her, his every sense screaming in alarm. The forest at night was a world of strange sounds and shifting shadows, but the fear of the living forest was nothing compared to the fear of the unnatural silence Mami Wura had brought to Iji. He followed her deep into the woods, to a place where the trees were so tall they blocked out the sky. The air grew cold and thick. After what felt like an eternity, he saw a soft, green light flickering up ahead. He crept closer, hiding behind the thick trunk of an iroko tree. What he saw in the small clearing made his breath catch in his throat. It was a shrine. Bones, animal bones, were arranged in a circle. In the center, a small clay lamp filled with a green, glowing liquid provided the only light. Mami Wura knelt before it, the clay pot uncovered in front of her. Inside were a dozen normal, brown chicken eggs. She began to chant, the same low, humming whisper Obasi had heard from her heart. But here, in this place, the words were clearer, and the power was palpable. The leaves on the trees around the clearing began to tremble, though there was no wind. As she chanted, she reached into the clay pot and took out a handful of a dark, wet substance. It looked like mud mixed with ash and something else, something that shimmered. She began to carefully smear this mixture onto each brown egg. And as she did, the most horrifying thing happened. The eggs began to change. Their brown shells slowly turned a pristine, glowing white. They were absorbing the mixture, transforming into the forbidden eggs she sold in the market. But that was not the worst part. As she walked, she spoke to the eggs, and this time, Obasi could hear every word. You carry the silence of the forgotten, she whispered to the first egg. You will steal the voice of the singer. She held it up, and it glowed brightly. She picked up a second egg, smearing it with the dark paste. You carry the numbness of the betrayed. You will freeze the heart of the lover. The shell turned white. A third egg. You carry the obedience of the broken. You will bend the will of the chief. She was putting her own pain, her own suffering, into the eggs. She was weaving her curses with the very fabric of her emotions. This was why the villagers were becoming empty, because she was filling them with her own hollowed-out feelings. Trembling, Obasi leaned forward to see better. His foot, numb from crouching for so long, slipped on a wet leaf. He stumbled, cracking a dry twig under his weight. The chanting stopped. The green light from the lamp flared violently. Mami Wura's head snapped up. Her eyes, reflecting the green glow, scanned the darkness, and they landed directly on the spot where Obasi was hiding. Her kind, warm smile was gone, replaced by a cold, furious mask. You, she said, her voice no longer a song, but a sharp, dangerous blade cutting through the night. You foolish man. You were told to eat your egg and find peace. She stood up slowly, and the green light seemed to gather around her, making her appear taller, more powerful, and terrifying. The transformed eggs in the pot began to pulse rapidly, like panicked hearts. Now, Mami Wura said, taking a step towards him, her eyes locked on his. You will not leave this forest as the man you are. The world seemed to shrink to the space between Obasi and Mami Wura. The forest, once just dark, now felt alive and hostile. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on Obasi's chest, making it hard to breathe. The green light from the shrine lamp pulsed, throwing long, dancing shadows that looked like grasping claws. You were told to eat your egg and find peace, Mami Wura said, her voice no longer a gentle song but a cold, hard thing, like stone. Now, you will not leave this forest as the man you are. Obasi's mind screamed at him to run, but his feet were rooted to the spot. It felt as if invisible vines had grown up from the forest floor, wrapping around his ankles, holding him fast. He could only watch in terror as Mami Wura took a slow, deliberate step towards him. In her hand, she now held one of the newly transformed eggs, glowing with a sickly greenish-white light. Who are you? Obasi managed to choke out, his voice a dry rasp. Mami Wura stopped a few feet from him. A sad, bitter smile touched her lips, but it never reached her eyes, which burned with that unnatural light. Who am I? She repeated softly. The people of Iji asked me that when I arrived. They were so happy with my eggs, they did not care about the answer. But you need to know, don't you? You need to understand the poison before you are forced to swallow it. She tilted her head, studying him like a strange insect. Very well. I will give you the story. It is the last story you will ever hear with your own mind. She began to pace slowly in front of him, the egg resting in her palm like a precious jewel. 20 years ago, there was a young woman in this village. Her name was Neoma. She was young and beautiful, and her laughter was like the sound of the stream after the rain. She loved a young man from this very village, a strong farmer named Dyke. They married, and for a year, they were happy. Their joy was a light for all to see. Her voice took on a distant, dreamy quality, but the pain in it was sharp and fresh. Then, the sickness came. It swept through Iji, taking the weak and the old. And it took Dyke. My Dyke. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, the green light around her flickered. I was broken. But the village did not comfort me. No. They began to whisper. They said, why did the sickness take strong Dyke and leave his weak wife? They said, Neoma has always been too beautiful, her voice too sweet. It is not natural. They said I was a witch. They said I had sucked the life from my own husband to preserve my youth. Obasi listened, his fear momentarily mixed with a horrifying pity. He remembered hearing whispers of such a story when he was a boy, a dark tale the elders did not like to repeat. The chief at that time, Chief Isa's father, listened to the whispers. Mami Wura continued, her voice turning hard again. One night, a mob came to my hut. They dragged me out. They called me horrible names. They beat me and threw stones. They said I had to leave, or they would burn me with my hut. And where was the village? Where were the people I had laughed with, shared meals with? They stood and watched. No one raised a voice to defend me. No one. Tears of pure anguish now streamed down her face, but they seemed to fuel the green energy around her, making it burn brighter. I ran. I ran into this very forest, expecting to die. But I didn't. I was found by others. Spirits of the forest, old and powerful. They took my broken heart and my terrible pain and they showed me how to use it. They taught me how to weave my silence into something tangible. They taught me how to make my emptiness into a gift I could give to others. She held up the glowing egg. This is my silence, Obasi. This is the numbness I felt when they took everything from me. This is the obedience I learned when I had to bow to their cruelty to survive. I am not giving them a curse. I am giving them a piece of myself. The peace they feel is the same emptiness that has lived inside me for 20 years. Her shout echoed through the trees, and the green light flared so brightly that Obasi had to shield his eyes. When he looked back, her face was a mask of grim triumph. And now, you will join them. You will understand my peace. She raised the egg, preparing to throw it or force it into his mouth. He didn't know. Desperation gave Obasi a strength he didn't know he had. He thought of his wife's blank face, his son's empty eyes. He would not become like that. With a guttural roar, he pulled with all his might against the invisible force holding him. To his shock, his foot moved an inch. Her power was strong, but his will, fueled by love for his family, was stronger. Seeing him struggle, Mami Wura's eyes widened in surprise. She hurled the egg at him. Obasi dove to the side, the spell broken as his terror for his family overrode his fear for himself. The egg smashed against the iroko tree where he had been hiding. There was a sizzling sound, and where the goo touched the bark, the wood turned black and began to smoke. He didn't wait to see more. Scrambling to his feet, he turned and ran. He ran as he had never run before, crashing through bushes, not caring about the thorns that ripped at his skin and clothes. Behind him, he heard Mami Wura let out a cry of pure fury, a sound that was neither human nor animal, but something ancient and terrible. The forest itself seemed to turn against him. Branches swung low to hit his face. Roots seemed to rise from the ground to trip him. The path he had followed in was gone, swallowed by the shifting shadows. He was lost, running blind, with the sound of her rage chasing him. He ran until his lungs felt like they were on fire and his legs were made of lead. He collapsed, panting, behind a thick cluster of thorny bushes, hoping they would hide him. He listened, his heart pounding in his ears. For a long time, there was nothing. Just the normal, eerie sounds of the night forest. Had he lost her? He dared to peek through the thorns. And there she was. She wasn't running. She was walking slowly, calmly, through the trees, her green light floating around her like a will-o'-the-wisp. She held another glowing egg in her hand. "You can run, Obasi," she called out, her voice echoing strangely, seeming to come from all directions at once. "But you are in my world now. The forest knows my pain. It will not hide you for long." She stopped, not 10 feet from his hiding spot. She knelt down and placed the egg carefully on the ground. Then she began to whisper to it, her words too low to hear. As she whispered, the egg began to pulse faster and faster. Then, it didn't just glow. It hatched. But no chick came out. Instead, a thick, black smoke poured from the cracking shell. The smoke did not dissipate. It coiled and twisted in the air, forming itself into a shape. A shifting, shadowy form with glowing green eyes, the same green as Mami Wura's light. It was a creature made of darkness and curse. "Find him," Mami Wura commanded softly. "Bring his wood to me." The shadow creature lifted its head, its green eyes scanning the darkness. It turned slowly, and then its gaze locked directly onto Obasi's hiding place. It had sensed him. With a silent, fluid movement, it began to slither towards the thorny bushes, its smoky body passing through the branches as if they weren't even there. Obasi was trapped. He was weaponless, alone, and facing a nightmare born from a cursed egg. The shadowy creature advanced, reaching for him with smoky tendrils that promised a fate worse than death. The shadowy creature slid through the thorns, its smoky form untouched by the sharp branches. 2 pinpricks of green fire locked onto Obasi, freezing him in place more effectively than any physical chains. A tendril of darkness, cold as a deep well, reached for his face. He could feel it pulling at him, not at his body, but at his very self, his memories, his fears, his love for his family. It was trying to siphon his will, to leave him hollow. With a cry of pure terror, Obasi scrambled backwards, falling over a root. His hand landed on a thick, broken branch. Without thinking, he grabbed it and swung it wildly at the smoke creature. The branch passed right through it with a chilling sizzle, and a jolt of icy pain shot up Obasi's arm. The creature recoiled for a second, its form swelling, but it was not destroyed. It was like trying to fight a nightmare. It was then that an old, strong voice cut through the night. "Spirit of ash and sorrow. You have no power here." A torch, blazing with real, orange fire, flew through the air and landed between Obasi and the creature. The shadow hissed, recoiling from the genuine flame. Obasi turned and saw Momankechi standing at the edge of the clearing, her body trembling but her face set like stone. In one hand she held a small, woven bag, and with the other she was sprinkling a fine, white powder, salt, onto the ground in a line. "The old ways have answers to the old evils, Obasi," she shouted. "Fire and salt. Now, run to me. Do not cross the line." The creature, enraged, swirled around the torch, but seemed afraid to touch the line of salt. Obasi didn't need to be told twice. He lunged forward, his legs feeling like water, and stumbled past Momankechi. She stood her ground for a moment longer, muttering a prayer in the old dialect, before turning and following him, her old legs moving with a speed born of desperation. They ran without looking back, the eerie green light of Mami Wura's shrine fading behind them. They didn't stop until they burst out of the forest and collapsed, gasping, on the bank of the river, the first light of dawn painting the sky in gentle pinks and oranges. The normal, peaceful world felt like a mockery. She told me everything, Obasi panted, his whole body shaking as he told Mama Nkechi about Neoma, about Dyke, about the betrayal. The eggs are made from her pain. She is filling everyone with her own emptiness. Mama Nkechi listened, her face growing sadder and more grim with every word. When he finished, she nodded slowly. I remember the stories of Neoma. I was a young woman then. The whispers, they were cruel and foolish. But what she has done, this is a darkness that cannot be forgiven. She has not healed her pain, she has become it. What do we do? Obasi asked, his voice desperate. We cannot fight that shadow. We cannot reason with the villagers. We are lost. No, Mama Nkechi said, her voice gaining a new strength. We are not. Now we know the source of our power. It is not just the forest, it is our story. It is our pain. And pain, my son, can be confronted. But we cannot do it with strength alone. We need wisdom. We need a memory that is stronger than her curse. She looked towards the waking village, a plan forming in her wise old eyes. The chief. Chief is. He was a young man when Neoma was banished. He was Dyke's friend. The curse has buried his memory, but it cannot have destroyed it completely. If we can find a way to reach him, to make him remember the truth of what happened, it might be the key. His spirit, as the leader of this village, is the anchor for her spell. If he wavers, the whole curse might waver. But how? Obasi asked. He is one of the most deeply affected. He looks at me without seeing me. We must speak to him in a language the curse cannot understand, Mama Nkechi said mysteriously. We must use a memory that belongs only to him and to the past. Later that morning, under the bright, deceivingly normal sun, Obasi and Mama Nkechi walked into the chief's compound. Chief was sitting in his usual chair, staring peacefully at the wall. His wives moved around him like quiet ghosts, their faces blank. Great Chief, Mama Nkechi began, her voice respectful but loud, cutting through the unnatural quiet. We have come to speak of the past. We have come to speak of Dyke. The name hung in the air. For a fraction of a second, Obasi thought he saw a flicker in the chief's eyes. A tiny, almost invisible twitch near his mouth. The curse was strong, but the memory was fighting back. Dyke was a great wrestler, Mama Nkechi continued, speaking slowly and clearly. Do you remember, Is? The year the wrestlers from Umeji came. Dyke fought their champion, Ofo. They wrestled from midday until the sun was low. It was a mighty struggle. She was painting a picture with her words, a vivid, emotional memory from their youth. Obasi watched the chief closely. His breathing seemed to change, becoming slightly quicker. Dyke was tired. Ofo lifted him high, ready to throw him to the ground. But Dyke, your friend Dyke, he remembered a move you two practiced as boys. He twisted in the air. He used Ofo's own strength against him. He landed on his feet and swept Ofo's legs from under him. The crowd roared. Do you remember the sound, Is? Do you remember how you ran into the ring and lifted him onto your shoulders? The two of you, victorious. Chief Ise's hand, which had been resting calmly on his knee, clenched into a fist. His brow furrowed. A low, guttural sound escaped his lips. It was a sound of effort, of someone trying to swim up from the depth of a deep, deep sleep. It was a great day, the chief whispered, the words strained, as if being pulled from a great distance. Hope surged in Obasi's chest. It was working. But then, a sweet, deadly voice came from the compound's entrance. Chief Is. You look troubled. The past can be a heavy burden. Mami Wura stood there, her basket on her hip. She smiled, but her eyes were cold. In her hand, she held not an egg, but a small, carved wooden whistle. She looked at Momankechi and Obasi with a look of pure, venomous hatred. "The old woman talks too much," she said, her voice deceptively soft. "She stirs up dust that is best left to settle." She raised the whistle to her lips and blew. No sound that Obasi could hear came out, but he felt it, the high, piercing vibration that made his teeth ache. In an instant, the entire compound changed. The chief's face went smooth and blank again, the brief flicker of memory extinguished. His wife stopped their walk. The few other Kaz villagers who were nearby turned slowly. And they all turned to look at Obasi and Momankechi. Their peaceful, empty smiles were gone. Now, their faces were unified in a single, silent expression, cold, mindless anger. Mami Wura had not just reinforced her peace. She had commanded them to defend it. To defend her. She pointed a long, elegant finger at the two of them, her voice dropping to a sinister whisper that carried across the suddenly deadly quiet compound. "Seize them." The silence in the chief's compound broke like a dam. It wasn't broken by noise, but by movement, a slow, deliberate, and terrifying advance. The villagers, their eyes vacant but their bodies fueled by Mami Wura's command, began to close in on Obasi and Momankechi. They did not shout. They did not run. They simply walked, their movements unified and purposeful, like a river flowing inevitably toward a waterfall. "Obasi," Momankechi whispered, her voice tight with fear. She gripped his arm, her old knuckles white. Obasi's heart hammered against his ribs. He looked at the faces of people he had known his whole life, the blacksmith, the farmer from the next hut, the chief's own wives. There was no recognition in their eyes, only a cold, blank intention. They would grab them, and they would do whatever Mami Wura said. There would be no struggle, no argument. They would be subdued with the quiet efficiency of sleepwalkers. Mami Wura watched from the gateway, a smile of serene victory on her face. She had won. She had turned his entire world against him. But as the first hands reached for them, Obasi did something unexpected. He did not fight. He did not push them away. Instead, he looked directly at Chief Is, who was now standing, his face once again an empty mask. "Chief Is!" Obasi cried out, not in anger, but in a voice filled with raw grief. "You were Dyke's friend. He loved this village. Would he want this? Would he want you to be a slave? Would he want his Neoma to become this thing of sorrow?" He then turned his gaze to Mami Wura, his eyes pleading. "Neoma. This is not justice. This is a prison you have built for yourself. You are not freeing yourself from the past, you are chaining yourself to it, and you are chaining everyone else with you." The villagers hesitated, their hands inches away. The direct appeal, the raw emotion in Obasi's voice, seemed to create a ripple in the stagnant pool of their cursed minds. Mami Wura's smile vanished. "Silence him," she ordered, her voice sharp. But Obasi continued, taking a step forward, ignoring the hands that could grab him at any moment. He looked at the villagers around him. "You are mothers. Fathers. You are people of Iji. Your children are waiting for you to come back. My sons, my wife, they are empty. Please, fight this." It was then that Momankechi spoke, her voice ancient and powerful. She did not address the crowd. She spoke only to Mami Wura, to Neoma. "The child, Neoma," she said softly. Mami Wura flinched as if she had been struck. The green light around her flickered violently. "What child?" Obasi whispered, confused. "The one you lost," Momankechi said, her eyes filled with a deep, knowing pity. "The one you were carrying when Dyke died. The grief for your husband was great, but the grief for the child you lost afterward, that is the true root of your pain, isn't it? That is the silence you have been trying to force onto the world." A terrible, wounded sound escaped Mami Wura's lips. The facade of the powerful sorceress cracked, and for a moment, she was just a grieving woman, bent double by a loss so profound it had twisted her soul. They took everything, she sobbed, the truth finally ripped from her. My love, my future, my child. They left me with nothing but this hollow space. And now you have made the whole village hollow, Mama Nkechi said, her tone not accusatory, but unbearably sad. You have made them feel your loss. But you have not healed. You have only multiplied your pain. In that moment of her shattered composure, something miraculous happened. Chief Is, who had been standing like a statue, suddenly gasped. He stumbled back, clutching his chest. The memory of his friend Dyke, the truth of Neoma's suffering, the weight of his father's mistake, it all broke through the curse at once. Neoma, he breathed, his voice his own again, rough with emotion and shame. What have we done? What have I allowed? He turned to the villagers, and with a voice that carried the authority of his true self, he shouted, "Stop. Everyone, stop." The spell shattered. It was like a gust of fresh wind blowing through a stuffy room. The villagers blinked, looking around in confusion. They looked at their hands, reached out to touch each other's faces, murmuring names in dawning recognition. The mindless peace was gone, replaced by the beautiful, messy chaos of being alive. They were remembering. Mami Wura, Neoma, watched it happen. The anger and the power drained from her. The green light faded until it was gone. She was just a tired, heartbroken woman standing in the gateway. She looked at the village coming back to life, and she saw the confusion and the dawning horror on their faces as they realized what had happened to them. She saw that her revenge had not brought her Dyke back. It had not brought her child back. It had only caused more pain. Obasi walked slowly toward her. The villagers parted for him, no longer a threat, just people waking from a bad dream. Neoma, he said softly. You were wronged. Terribly wronged. But it is over now. We remember. We understand. You don't have to carry this pain alone anymore. He held out his hand, not in anger, but in offer. An offer of peace. True peace. Neoma looked at his hand, then at the faces of the villagers, who were now looking at her not with fear, but with a stunned and growing pity. She saw Chief Is, with tears in his eyes, bow his head to her in a gesture of profound apology. The fight went out of her. She shook her head slowly, a single tear tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. It is too late for me, she whispered. The forest is my home now. The woman who was Neoma, she died in this village long ago. She turned and walked away, not with the power of a sorceress, but with the weary steps of someone carrying a burden too heavy to bear. She walked towards the river and into the forest, and no one tried to stop her. She was never seen in Iji again. The village healed, but it was never quite the same. The memory of the peaceful silence was a ghost that haunted them. They rebuilt their lives, but they also built a small shrine at the edge of the forest, not to worship, but to remember. To remember the pain they had caused and the pain that had been returned to them 100-fold. Obasi's family woke up. Amora held him and cried for a day straight. His sons clung to him, confused but aware. The curse was broken. And sometimes, on very quiet nights, the people of Iji would hear a soft, sad song drifting from the depths of the forest. It was not a chant of power anymore. It was a lullaby. A lullaby for a child who was never born, and for a love that was lost forever. It was a reminder that some pain never fully goes away, but that it must not be used to build prisons of silence for others. For if only they had known they were sold forbidden eggs, they would have understood that the cheapest price is often the one that costs your very soul. Honestly, weren't the villagers better off under Mami Wura's spell? They had no arguments, no stress, and free food. Obasi should have just minded his business and enjoyed the peace. Why are we always glorifying people who disrupt a good thing? Obi, what did you think?